dads are very often forgotten. When we talk about postnatal depression, the first thing that comes into your mind is a mother with depression. And we forget that actually a high proportion of dads will suffer from postnatal depression as well. And it's not that illogical if you think about it. First of all, lots of men will suffer from depression. And so it's likely that sometimes this is going to happen when the baby's born. Depression, as we've said, is much more likely if there's been some sort of stressful life event. And even though a baby is a really joyous life event, it's also a very stressful event. It leads to an enormous change in lifestyle, financial implications, sleepless nights, a whole kind of change in the structure of the family. Particularly a first child is an enormous game changer in the whole sort of dynamic of your relationship between husband and wife.
As a pecking order, he's behind the child.
Exactly. Husband is used to being the number one person in his wife's life, and suddenly there's this other little creature who's kind of taken over. And you get from this sort of husband-wife dyad, you've suddenly got a whole new dynamic with husband's got to develop a relationship with the baby, the relationship with the wife has changed, the wife and the baby are spending an enormous amount of time together. Dad is very often feeling quite excluded from this because he can't breastfeed, has his 2 weeks paternity leave and then he's off at work, and therefore there's all of this stuff, this whole change in life that's gone on that he can feel very excluded from. So it shouldn't come as any surprise that one of the big risk factors for postnatal depression in dad is postnatal depression in the mom. It's just going to put that much more pressure on the father, that much more distress. And it's going to express itself in some sense in very different ways. So for example, you don't tend to, although dad may resent the baby to some extent because of the way he's sort of usurped him in the pecking order, you often don't see that same sort of sense of rejection or anger towards the baby, or it's very rare that a dad feels the desire to harm the baby. And that's just largely because he's physically removed from the situation. So when mom is having postnatal depression, her whole world revolves around the baby, and therefore all of her ruminations and obsessions and thoughts and anxieties are going to be around baby. Whereas dad is at work, he's got to bring in the money, he's got to get the car MOT'd, he's got all of these other functions, and as a result, it's going to express itself in perhaps a slightly more classical way. But he'll still have those same symptoms: the lack of sleep, the low appetite, either feeling agitated or kind of slowing of thoughts, lots and lots of anxiety very often. And it's also, if mom has been a working mom, and suddenly dad has become a breadwinner, then suddenly there's this increased anxiety, especially in this day and age. If I lose my job, it's not just us two now that I've got to look after, but I've got to provide for this little one as well. So anxiety tends to be very high. So this can be an incredibly stressful event for the dad. And I think the real take-home message is, whether mom has got postnatal depression or not, we actually need to really be thinking about the father and asking the questions of the dad to check that he's okay. Because he's the one who's always forgotten. And I see it myself. We've got friends who just had a baby. They were around here on Saturday night, and I noticed everyone asked the mom, how is she getting on? Is she getting any sleep? How is she feeling? And nobody asked the dad. We just kind of presume dad's going to cope, and very often they don't. So there's a higher rate of postnatal depression in dads, and once again, previous depression is a risk factor, family history of depression, stressful life events in the pregnancy or the birth, and once again in some cultures, the gender of the baby may be a risk factor for dad's depression.